It's amazing to see everybody. Thank you. Welcome. Thanks so much to all of you for being here through all the twists and turns that we're all experiencing. And as we get here, just everyone in your own way, take a deep breath, feet on the ground, feel yourself arriving in this space. The good fortune of all of us being together. I'm certainly feeling that good fortune. We have so many representatives from circles, the council circles from all over the world here together today in this thought form that we're creating. And we're so happy that Sherri and Katharine are joining us, and Susi, who's part of that whole process, and sharing what they've been working on together. I also want to thank everybody who's been part of this kind of international conversation before, because so many of you asked that we try to continue this process of bringing us together. And so we are going to do that. And this is the initial launch of that series. So we'll be meeting bi-monthly, raising questions from this group, drawing from the expertise and wisdom of our members for these conversations. So today we are so lucky to be starting by celebrating this new anthology, All We Can Save. And it's co-edited by Katharine Wilkinson, who's with us, and Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. And it features both Sherri and Susi in essays. It's a fierce, loving chorus of women speaking to where we are in this time and calling us to the life-affirming possibilities from here. So quickly, just to say, Katharine, who's a geographer, we have a lot of geographers. Geography is part of this, this thought forum here. An author, strategist, teacher, principal writer, and editor-in-chief at Project Drawdown. And obviously with Ayanna, she co-edited this anthology and founded the All We Can Save project that maybe you'll tell us a little about. And, Sherri, I think everyone knows, is a Penobscot attorney, teacher, activist, change maker, and her book, Sacred Instructions, is just an extraordinary guide for us in these times. So I'm so grateful to have her with us. Thank you, Sherri. And Susi Moser, is actually one of the people I was provoked to think. You provoked me, Susi, 25 years ago to start thinking about where we are with this dire situation. So thank you. Geographer, been working on climate communication and adaptation for all these years. And she's also the author of the groundbreaking anthology, Creating a Climate for Change, which really helped define that field. So let's start first with Katharine. Katharine, please speak to us a little bit about yours and Ayanna's vision for this book, if you would.
Sure, I'd be delighted. Thank you, Sarah. I love that mention of Susi's edited volume because it sat on my desk through my whole PhD. It felt like a lifeline, which I don't know if I've ever told you that, Susi, but yeah, so really wonderful to be with you all. I'm joining from Atlanta, so interesting political hotbed in the U.S. at the moment, and on Muskogee Creek land. So All We Can Save, Sarah, I loved your description of a fierce and loving chorus, because I think that is exactly what we were hoping this book would be. And maybe the best place to start actually is with the title. So we were very determined to name this book in a way that was adequately expansive for the voices and perspectives in its pages, and that it find that middle ground between refusing to look away from the dire place that we find ourselves in, but also keeping a steady gaze on what is possible. And there's a poem by Adrienne Rich called Natural Resources. And our editor at One World, which is our publisher, sent us the closing stanza of that poem for some inspiration. And Rich writes, "My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world." And we felt like that spirit was so very much the spirit of this book. And our hearts are also moved by all we cannot save, but also all that we still can. And we feel very convicted that all we can save very much depends on the we. And it very much depends on the we centering the voices of women and girls, centering the voices of those who are most intimately familiar with the root causes of the crisis we find ourselves in, as well as the impacts. And we also feel very convicted about truth, courage, and solutions, that's sort of the trifecta we think of what is needed. So those are very much through lines in this collection, sort of going beyond just facts to really kind of the deeper so what truth of where we are. Courage very much leading not just from the head, but from the heart, and solutions, right? There are just a panoply of approaches in this book. And what I thought I might do is just read this little sort of prose poem that's in what we call the begin, the first essay in the book. Ayana and I were very anxious about trying to do a traditional anthology introduction where you sort of summarize each section of the book, because we were like, how could we even begin to do that well? And so we found ourselves also sort of turning to poetry to capture how the book unfurls. So for those who have not yet dived into this book, here's a little bit of an overview. Root, a call, a welcoming, a place to ground, the foundation of indigenous wisdom and the wisdom of Earth's living systems, interconnection, emergence, justice, regeneration. Advocate, strategy, participation, public good, applying tools of legislation and litigation, how we hold the powerful to account and rewrite the rules with all people in mind. Reframe, language and story, creativity and culture are means of making sense, to tell the truth, expand, flip, and rekindle it, imagining, evolving, holding on to our humanity. Reshape, problems embedded in the contours of cities, transport, infrastructure, capitalism, coastlines and landscapes where human nature meet, much to reconsider, rend, invert, remake. Persist. Damn if this work isn't hard, our task towering. The fire of activism on the front lines, in the belly. Standing for justice, for health, for the sacred. We don't have to do this alone. Feel. Awake, aware, attuned, hearts break, souls shake with anxiety. Can't skip this. Struggling, mourning, raging, healing. A ferocious love for the planet we call home. Nourish. Soil, food, water, sky, inseparable. The foundations of our aliveness. Collaborating with and supporting nature. Microbes, farmers, photosynthesis. Rise. Generations growing, giving, gathering. Nurture community and transformation. For a future that holds us, all of us. This is the work of our lifetimes. And Sherri's piece is in the opening section of the book called Root, and Susi's is in the Feel section, which happen to be, I think, my two favorite sections of All We Can Save. I think I'll leave it there, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Katharine. So let's turn to Sherri and see how you see, Sherri, the intentions of the book, and also if you can offer, something from your own work.
I think I'm going to do the reading first, because my comments, I think, will make sense in relation to the reading. And I just want to say hello to my friend, Dr. Katharine Wilkinson. Katharine and I met at a drawdown conference where the men in the room casually dismissed her credentials. So every single time I got on stage and had the opportunity to speak, I reminded everyone of Katharine's credentials. So it's good to see your face. And here is a reading from my section of the book. One of the more damaging effects of colonization and forced assimilation has been the homogenization of our societies. Under colonial regimes, the voices of those on the fringes of society or living completely outside of the colonial system have been silenced or ignored. The stifling of creative thinking and suppression of critical analysis that results from such narrow representation erodes the overall intelligence of the entire society. These restrictive systems provide no opportunity for alternative ways of being to be presented. And since cultural ways of being are passed on from one generation to the next, there has been very little variation in the destructive patterns that brought us to this place of collective crisis. The overall lack of diversity within the patriarchal colonial paradigm has had a suffocating impact on creative intelligence and a divisive impact on society. Diversity fosters social coherence, creating more stable and harmonious relational networks, which in turn lead to more stable and harmonious societies. Additionally, the more diverse a group or community, the greater the perspectives and innovations that arise, and the greater the success rate for all. Human diversity is just as critical to society as biodiversity is to an ecosystem. Without it, there can be no healthy functioning. The loss of diversity within mainstream systems and structures has left a fracture in our societies that must now be healed through the purposeful and systematic inclusion of diverse voices, including the voices of the natural world within the social dialogue. Every natural soundscape generates its own unique signature, one that contains incredible amounts of information. And when we listen closely, it gives us incredibly valuable tools by which to evaluate the health of a habitat across the entire spectrum of life. The voices of the natural world can inform us when an ecosystem has been unsettled by human activity. This is something that Indigenous peoples have always known, because we have been listening to the voices of the natural world in our territories for thousands of years. When we recognize the personhood of the beings in the natural world, we start to recognize that they have something valuable to teach us. The rocks, the eldest among us, carry 4 billion years of stories. This is why we refer to them as grandfathers, because they carry an enormous amount of diverse information and perspective. Every plant, tree, and animal carries its own unique wisdom and can teach us how to live harmoniously with one another and in relationship with Mother Earth. When we extend our view of kinship beyond our anthropocentric view, a whole new world of knowledge becomes available to us. Another benefit of kincentric awareness is that it informs us of our responsibilities and obligations. When we have a bond of kinship with another, it impacts the way that we care for them. In healthy systems, we treat our kin with a greater degree of care, often expressing more gentleness and protectiveness toward them. It is the same when we love. When we love, we treat the beloved with reverence and respect. Indigenous peoples living in accordance with these beliefs have lived in loving relationship with the beings in the natural world for millennia. Indigenous kinship systems provide models of reciprocal care. We care for Mother Earth and Mother Earth cares for us. We have words in our language that help to remind us of the balance that this relationship requires. One of those words is Mama Bizu. It means he or she has enough. It is an acknowledgement that an individual has what they need to live their life with a sense of safety and dignity. Another word, Alabizu, means everyone has enough. The everyone envisioned in that phrase includes all the beings in the natural world. When we are contemplating the value of enough, we recognize that Mama Bizu must always be weighed against Alabizu to ensure that there is a balance to life. In order to survive, we must all come to realize that we do not exist solely for the benefit and development of our individual lives as human beings. Rather, our role as human beings is to evolve into a state of interbeing with the rest of life, so that we may join the universal flow that is ever moving toward harmony and balance. This is the only way that life on Mother Earth will remain viable into the future. And so when I thought about your question, Sarah, about why is this book important? What is it about this that moves my heart, as Katharine noted earlier? And I have to say that it's the way that it brings forward the wisdom of the matriarchs, that we have been living in a society that has been void of the loving guidance of the mother for far too long, that it is the grandmothers, the mothers, the aunties in our communities, in our families that hold us all together. They're the ones who make sure that everybody's taken care of, that someone's not infringing on the rights of the other. When an older sibling or cousin is picking on a younger sibling or cousin, they get in there and they say, now, don't you treat them like that. That's not okay, and they move you on and foster up your ethical and moral fiber, right? The systems that have been created over the last 2 millennia have been created absent that wisdom. And so in our language, and I apologize, I just want to take a moment to introduce myself in my language, which I forgot to do at the beginning. Ndeli wisi wana hamukwasita na jiobana wabskewi, pasilda and dilnabamo kawasis no bana wabskewi nagakakagus nil tibaik. My name in my language is Wana Hamukwasita. I'm from the Penobscot Nation. My family is Bear Clan from the Penobscot Nation and Crow Clan from the Passamaquoddy tribe at Sibaik. But in our language, one of the words for the matriarchs within a marriage is translates to the one who keeps me connected to my heart and spirit. And so it is the matriarchs who keep us as families, as communities, as societies connected to our heart and spirit. And what's been created has been absent, that heart and spirit that's necessary for the sustaining and the perpetuation of life, that all mothers everywhere have worked so hard to preserve. And so to me, the benefit of this book is that it brings back the voices of those who have the best possible potential for righting the wrongs that have led us to this place historically, and to begin moving us back in the direction that's connected to a sustainable life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Well, Susi, can you share also and your reflection on the book? And then we'll ask the two of you to reflect together.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And thank you so much for hosting this. It's just a wonderful way for all of us, I think, to gather and connect around this incredible creation that Ayana and Katharine have done. Maybe I'll just want to start with the simple fact that every time I pick this book up and read another chapter, it feels, I just want to scream. I just want to, say yes, 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 every single time. And every time I hear someone speak about it, that's actually what happens, and including by men. It seems to be particularly gratifying to actually be recognized by men for the incredible importance of what all of these chapters are talking about. So I'll start with that. And thank you again, Katharine, for doing this book. You know, sometimes anthologies become career changers. I can speak to that myself. And I hope that this is one for you. So you mentioned, Sarah, that I work on adaptation and communication, and within the communication field, I've always been interested in the emotional side of climate change and how we cope and deal with the challenges that this topic brings up. And so I'm in this chapter that I got to include here, I'm combining that. I do a lot of work in the adaptation field, working with a lot of professionals, the ones who keep you all safe. And the question that has come up for me for years now is, how do the people who do this work day in and day out, how do they keep going emotionally, physically, you know? So this chapter is about that, about how we keep going. And incidentally, the adaptation field is to the tune of, I would say 75, 80% women-led. So the people who will prepare us for climate change, who will help us cope with it, are women. So with that, I'll just read you a little bit, sort of a patchwork of excerpts from my chapter. Put your ear to the ground and you can hear something strange happening in college classrooms and at farmers markets, in church basements and conference side events, in office storage rooms turned secret employee gathering spaces, in private social media groups, in bookstores and libraries. Be still and listen. There are silent tears flowing, people talking in hushed voices, trying to contain their anger, fears, grief, and despair. At first, you will have to listen hard for the sounds of these times, but they get louder as you pick up their vibrations. We are hurting. We are afraid. We are exhausted. At least some of us, some of the time, and some of us again and again. And then you will know you are not alone. More and more, I find myself in such spaces. One Sunday afternoon, I went to a local church to join a climate listening circle organized by members of Extinction Rebellion and Climate Action Now. Some 20 people, almost all of them women, 20-something to 70-somethings, gathered to share feelings, vulnerable, worried, overwhelmed, and in despair. They came seeking a place to be all of themselves. They came to do not just climate change work, but as one put it astutely, culture change work. I've been to many such circles, participating in or leading them. As a social scientist eager to have my finger on the pulse of society, I come not just to participate, but to see how people are learning to show up for the emotional onslaught of climate change, how people self-organize for mutual support through this century of transformation. Most, like this one, bring together climate activists. Rarely, if ever, among them are there climate scientists or so-called adaptation professionals, people like resource managers, infrastructure engineers, or city planners charged with helping communities prepare for and manage the impacts of climate change. In this circle, I was once again intensely aware that those practitioners were not in the room. Scientific reputation, professional decorum, and the ever-present expectation of expert impartiality and the absence of outward expression of emotion, all of them stand in the way of these public figures joining such a circle. Where, I wondered, do they go? Over the last few years, I've been thinking a lot about just that. What do humans need to get through this mega crisis? I don't mean with clean technologies, hard-hitting carbon prices, or incisive policies. I mean, what do the people working on climate change need in order to keep showing up for the long and psychologically taxing journey ahead? Bringing attention to the psychosocial challenges of working as climate professionals is not to elicit sympathies, not to wag a finger about ignoring a growing problem. It's certainly not intended to dissuade anyone from this career path, far from it. The point is simply this: Burnt out people are less effective people. Burnt out people can become sick people. Burnt out people leave their jobs and are replaced by less experienced people. Burnt out people aren't equipped to serve a burning planet. And I'll just do a couple more small bits here. In a world of accelerating change, the well-being of our hearts and souls must be reestablished to the rightful place as relevant and essential. This is work that will resurrect what we have wrongfully abandoned far too long, bring back the feminine in all of us, and restore our human wholeness. Caring for our hearts and minds, rejuvenating our bodies, reconnecting with one another, and deepening into our deepest purpose is taking our psyches seriously. This is an act of rebellion against the extinction of soul. That too is climate change work. It is culture change work, and it is essential. So that's, in this chapter, I talk a little bit about what we know so far about how to take care of ourselves, but I think it's also an area of research, of really trying to understand what exactly it is that we need to keep going. The need for that is so rapidly expanding. And this year with COVID and the, economic crisis and everything, like all these women who have these responsible jobs also being school teachers now and full-time mothers at the same time. There's a reason we call this, for the first time, a female recession. I think it's really, really critical for us to think about that in our work of how we support the people who keep us safe. If they are not safe, then how will we be safe? It's enlightened self-interest, I think, that we do that. In the same way that I hear Sherri talk about this, enlightened self-interest to see the world in its diversity, but not fractured, is the other term that she uses in this beautiful chapter. And within that diversity, that, we are held in a union, in a oneness that's an ontology. That's not just an epistemology. That's not just how we view the world. It's really how it is. And at the risk of our losses, of our survival, we are not seeing that. So I love, Sherri, your chapter for, bringing that really forward of how critical it is for us to get it this time, not just intellectually, but actually live into that. And then for you to offer some, what I see as living models of sustainability, including the knowledge of how people have gone and survived and come through collapse. This notion of radical hope, right? Of remaking the means, the ends, and our culture and everything in the process. Of surviving and restoring and rebuilding. So I love this notion of thinking of ourselves being in kinship with everything. So we don't have to do it alone. And just in the way we think of family as being there for us in crisis, so is everything else. If we took that seriously, so is the world, So thank you, Sherri, for that incredible chapter and for challenging us to come to see that. So I'll leave it at that and we'll go into conversation.
Great. Sherri, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I did. I just, one of the things that struck me about Susi's chapter and even what she offered us here today was the reflection that it offered, I think, of where I come from in relation to, this term that we call Skidjinaway Bamosawagan, this way of being in the world. Because what really came to me was that these individual ways of life, right, that we have been living are detrimental to our well-being on so many levels that, let's do an experiment instead of some research. Let's really see if we can build community, a community of women. Let's build cooperative networks that are helping and supporting one another, lift this up. I've been talking to a number of young mothers, young single mothers out there, and then just said, okay, well, let's just connect all of you. And then you can all have time for breaks, and you can all be working together. You can create a bubble together during COVID so that you can help one another. And so what I think that is important about what Susi's talking about is that at the core of everything that we're doing, whether we're doing adaptation work, mitigation work, whether we're on the front lines. One of the other authors right now, Tara Huska, is on the front line of Line 3 in Minnesota, trying to protect all of the wild ricing lakes in Minnesota and the Mississippi River from Enbridge Line 3. And there has to be trauma healing at the core of everything, right? There has to be a place for those tears to be shed. There has to be the courage to talk about it within all of these scientific and legal and political arenas that we find ourselves in. And so, looking at Susi's offerings, I think that the most important aspect of that is recognizing our humanity in the moment that we find ourselves in, recognizing the need for dealing with our mental, emotional, and even spiritual well-being, not just looking at the science, not just looking at data on a piece of paper, but looking at our humanity and how our humanity is at stake, as well as our environment, as well as our vital ecosystems. And because if we don't address the things that Susi talks about, if we don't do that work, then we will have to shut ourselves down and lose something that is vital to all of society going forward. And that is, our compassion for one another as human beings. And so all of these things just kind of weave together. And so, and like Susi, every time I sit down, because I'll sit down and I'll just, flop the book open and just start reading. And then I'll find a little tweetable section and I'll tweet it out, right? And so every single time I read something, I have that same visceral reaction in my body of, yes, it needs to be a weaving together of all of these collective voices, and this rising up of that powerful, fierce, loving, fiery voice of the mother, who is tired of seeing her children abused, is not going to put up with the nonsense of, essentially, I was thinking of this the other day, that we have all of these depictions in our society of boys, right? We have the Proud Boys, we have the Good Old Boys, we have all of these networks of boys. And the mother is coming in and just, saying, okay, enough of your nonsense. You boys go off somewhere else, and bring in the men. Where are the responsible men who are going to stand here in support of the mother as she rights the wrongs that have been created by all of these boys? And so part of that work is really healing the wounds that have been caused by essentially what's been a Lord of the Flies experiment run amok, really, upon society. And so I just, and whenever I'm feeling like Susi defines, whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed, whenever I need to let the tears flow, now one of the things I do is I pick up this book, and it helps to encourage me and inspire me, and to know, as Susi said, that I'm not alone in this struggle, that we're all together. And I know that both Katharine and Ayanna put so much of their soul. I've heard stories of standing up on the chair and shouting, yes, yes, when things were being read. And because it's enlivening something within us that has been suppressed for so long. And so it's just such a great joy to be part of this incredible group of women who are all doing incredible work in their own right, but collectively have, such incredible potential to um, write our course. And I just ask you all to just really think about the women, the indigenous women who are putting their lives on the line, who are on the front line, trying to protect these really vital and sacred waterways for all of us. They're not just doing this for themselves. They're out there for all of us. And so we have contributors to this book who are on those front lines right now, who are working to preserve the possibility for life for us all. And so I just ask that you remember them, especially as we're moving into winter. Minnesota is a very difficult place to be in the winter under normal circumstances, and certainly when you're having to be outside on the front lines trying to protect the ability of your peoples to survive in sub-zero temperatures. They deserve not only our thought but our active support. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Susie, Katharine, response? Anything you'd like to add?
I feel so moved to have a chance to hear you all read from your pieces. Sherri, I've had that chance with you before, but Ayana and I spent so much time with these words in Google Docs, over the winter and spring. And it's incredibly moving to hear you all read this wisdom. Susie, I will never forget the moment we had when we got to that line of yours about burned out people. And both Ayana and I were sort of like, had that feeling of like, the punch in the gut that's like, yes, this is the core thing. And I'm so moved that the book has been nourishing for both of you. I think that is really what we hoped that this book might be, right? That for people who have been in the work for a long time, that it might provide some of that balm, salve, sense of sort of breaking the loneliness, some nourishment, and also for people who are newer to the topic or newer to the movement, that it would be a welcoming in, right? I think, the climate movement has not always or often been a particularly welcoming place, actually. There's been lots of racism, lots of misogyny, lots of kind of trumping of the prefrontal cortex and the dismissing of all other sort of ways of knowing and being. And that's just not going to work, right? We need the biggest, strongest team possible. And that means grabbing people by the hand and saying, we need you and we'll support you. And this is not the domain of scientists and policy wonks. Certainly we need scientists and policy wonks, but that really everyone has a role to play because we are all human beings alive on this planet in this moment. And whatever your superpowers are, we need them. And I had a really wonderful opportunity to teach this book very unexpectedly, very last minute, to a group of undergraduate students. And the week that they read The Begin, it's a very short little piece that Ayana and I wrote together. And one of my students said in class, I was shaking while I read The Begin because I felt so empowered. And that, that is what we want, right? That sense of, it's not just okay to be a woman in this space. It's not just okay to bring a commitment to gender equality. It's not just okay to bring matriarchal wisdom, but that is the crux of it. That is so desperately what we need in this moment. And I am so hopeful that the teenagers, young 20-somethings will not ever put those commitments or those faculties to the side, thinking that somehow, they don't have a place, because Yeah, I think they are that sort of burning ember of a heart to this work. And Sarah, you asked me to mention something about the project, and I neglected to do that. So we sort of suspected that this might be the case, and then it became very clear as the book was coming to life that this needed to be more than a book. That this work of learning, of healing, of connecting and community building, and also provisioning support for this kind of transformational leadership that is present in these pages, that there's a lot of work to do. And what's wonderful in this moment, I think, is that there is an ecosystem of efforts emerging, and so we feel lucky that the All We Can Save project will just be sort of one of those, and we're in the midst of kind of honing our vision and theory of change, these things that funders want to want to know you have absolute clarity about. And we're thinking about focusing on a vision that a decade from now, in 2030, that feminist, or as Sherri would say, matriarchal climate leadership holds a majority of power in the movement and experiences a majority of joy in their work. So thinking about both, the narrative power, the institutional power, the people building power, right, that's necessary to affect change, and joy as sort of a summation of what it takes to stay in the work, knowing that to get to joy, there's a lot of that healing that both Susi and Sherri have talked about, to arrive there, and a necessity of connection, right? That joy is not a place we arrive at as individuals. So that's a little bit of what we're thinking about, and I can pop into the chat. I'll pop in our website for anyone who wants to stay up to date. And we also have been doing All We Can Save circles this fall. So inviting, or sort of providing some light touch facilitation resources for people to get into the kind of circle that that Susi mentioned, using this book as kind of an anchor and a jumping off point for a deeper and more generous dialogue, and some community building work that we know we so need, right? The sort of relational work, the web between us and in the movement.
Thank you, Katharine.
Add one short thing to what Katharine just said. So of course, there is the attempt to actually support women in their leadership throughout the movement that you're also working on. So putting your money where your mouth is, or the eventual money where your mouth is. I guess, I want to say one thing that probably, knowing what it's like to be an exhausted editor after a project like this, you probably don't want to hear. But there are about, 2.5, 3 billion voices missing. And you know that. Certainly every time I open my inbox, I'm thinking, oh my God, and she should be in there, and oh my God, she should be in there. So maybe there is a form of light touch gathering of additions to this book online, that will simply make it so much more visible that women take such incredible leadership. I mean, look at this screen, right? We have a few honorific men here. Thank you very much for being here. And I know many of you, being good members of society. So thank you for that. And I also feel, we need to show this plethora to so many more people. It needs to become that much more visible. So, not that you might have energy right now to do this, but I hope as part of your new assignment, with All We Can Save project, that you actually will find ways to make it that much more visible. that many more women visible, including all of the ones here. So thank you.
Yeah, I hope so too. And we'll give some thought to form and kind of how to do that gathering. But I agree. I think sort of a more nimble kind of digital portal could be a really nice way to do that.
Thank you so much. Sherri, was there anything else you wanted to add? We're sort of heading toward moving toward the councils.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I had been asked to put in the comment in the chat links to how you can support the water protectors, the women in Anishinaabe territory who are on the front line. So I'm going to just add 2 links to the chat line.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And Katharine, I think you and I and those of us involved with the council need to have a conversation, because I think our work is so aligned with your concerns and came out of originally, and it actually still has many circles of women doing these deep conversations. So we will talk more, and many of them are here today. We're heading into our councils to really explore the questions that have come up and the ideas that have come up. We have a group of national conveners with us. I just want to mention Diana Chapman-Walsh is here, John Bales, Barbara Waldorf, Kevin Gallagher, Aurora Winslade, and Walter Wright, and myself will all be facilitating circles, and those are all created. So you will find yourself in one of those shortly. We thought we should take a brief break. So it's 11:50 right now. So Michelle Sayles, who is also right there with us, is going to be facilitating the breakouts. And I don't know if you want to go ahead and make them happen, Michelle, or if you want to wait 5 minutes while we take a quick break. What's your preference?
I'll move everyone over shortly. And if there's any issues, we'll have a few minutes to sort that out.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you all again. This is the last time we'll all be together today. This is a real blessing to be with the 3 of you and all of us at this moment. And just know that we have recorded this, and it will be available on our website so we can all return to it. Thank you very much. And we'll see everybody in circles very shortly.